The Arabian Peninsula is one of the oldest inhabited regions in the world. For thousands of years it has served as the crossroads between Africa, Europe, and Asia. By the time of the Classical Age, when Rome dominated the Mediterranean, the Arabian Peninsula was home to a vast network of tribes, merchants, and nomadic communities. These early societies formed the cultural and political foundation that would later shape one of the greatest civilizations in history, the Arab empires of Islam. Geography and early civilization. The Arabian Peninsula is defined by its harsh desert landscapes, rugged mountains, and vast, open plains. The most notable features include the Rub al-Khali, or empty quarter, the largest sand desert in the world, the Hijaz Mountains, running along the western coastline, where cities like Mecca and Medina would later emerge, the Nafud Desert in the north, which formed a natural barrier between Arabia and the Near East. Despite the extreme conditions, the peninsula was not isolated. Since ancient times, trade routes connected it to Mesopotamia, Persia, the Levant, and even the Indian subcontinent. Archaeological discoveries suggest that civilization in Arabia dates back to at least the ancient Dilmun civilization, based in present-day Bahrain, was a crucial trading hub between Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley. Over the centuries, different groups migrated to the region, including Semitic-speaking peoples, who settled in both the desert and the fertile oasis. By the first millennium BCE, the peninsula was home to two primary types of societies: sedentary agricultural communities, found in southern Arabia, modern Yemen, and Oman. These societies built irrigation systems and established early kingdoms like Saba and Hadramaut. Nomadic Bedouins. These were tribal groups who moved across the desert in search of water and pasture for their livestock. They were skilled traders and warriors, deeply tied to their clans and tradition. These groups would form the backbone of Arabian society and influence the development of Islam centuries later. The Bedouin society and tribal system. The Bedouins were the dominant force in pre-Islamic Arabia. They lived in the desert, moving with their herds of camels and goats. Their lifestyle was defined by clan loyalty. The clan, or Qabila, was the most important social unit. It provided security and identity in a dangerous environment. The Majalis, a council of elders that advised the sheikh, the tribal leader. Hospitality and honor, generosity and bravery were the most respected virtues. Violating a guest's protection was considered a grave dishonor. Raiding Guz. Clans often raided one another for resources, but these conflicts were regulated by strict codes of honor. This tribal system meant that Arabia had no central government. Instead, it was a land of independent clans and alliances, bound by oral tradition and customary law. Over time, some of these tribes settled in major trade centers, where they began interacting with neighboring empires. Trade and urbanization. By the 1st century CE, Arabia was at the heart of a growing trade network. The incense trade, frankincense and myrrh, two of the most valuable commodities of the ancient world, came from southern Arabia. Caravans transported these goods north through the Hijaz, passing through Mecca and Medina. These routes connected Arabia with Egypt, Rome, Persia, and India. Mecca as a trade hub. Mecca became a wealthy commercial center, where traders from different regions met. The Quraysh, the dominant tribe of Mecca, controlled trade and maintained peaceful relations among rival tribes. New routes after Rome's decline. As the Western Roman Empire fell, the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, and the Sassanid Persians fought for dominance. War between these empires made traditional trade routes through Mesopotamia unsafe. As a result, trade shifted further into the Arabian interior, strengthening cities like Mecca and Medina. This increasing economic activity brought immense wealth to Arabia, but also created new social divides. Religion in pre-Islamic Arabia. Religion in pre-Islamic Arabia was polytheistic and varied by region. Most Arabs worshipped multiple deities, with each tribe having its own gods and sacred symbols. Allah was recognized as a supreme deity, but not the sole god. Many Arabs believed in jinn, supernatural spirits that influenced daily life. Sacred sites and the Kaaba. One of the most important religious sites was the Kaaba in Mecca. The Kaaba housed sacred stones including a black meteorite, believed to be from the heaven. It was surrounded by 360 idols, each representing a different deity. Once a year, different tribes made a pilgrimage to Mecca to worship at the Kaaba and conduct trade. This annual gathering created a sense of unity among Arabian tribes, despite their different beliefs. However, beyond polytheism, Arabia was also home to Jewish and Christian communities. Jewish tribes had settled in Medina, Yemen, and northern Arabia. Christianity spread along trade routes, influencing Arab merchants. Some Arabs were drawn to monotheistic traditions, questioning their traditional beliefs. This changing religious landscape set the stage for a new faith, one that would soon emerge in Mecca. By the late 6th century, Arabia was on the verge of transformation. The tribal system had long defined Bedouin life, but increasing wealth and urbanization were changing the social order. Trade had connected Arabia to the world, bringing new ideas and influences. Religious beliefs were evolving, with more Arabs being exposed to monotheism. It was in this world that Muhammad would rise, bringing a message that would reshape Arabia and the entire world. The Prophet and the birth of Islam, 606. The traditional tribal system was being challenged by urbanization, trade wealth, and the exposure to new religious ideas. It was during this transformative period that Muhammad ibn Abdullah, an orphan from the Quraysh tribe, would rise to proclaim a new faith, Islam. His message would forever alter Arabia and lay the foundation for a vast Islamic civilization. His birth occurred during a time known as the Year of the Elephant, a reference to an attempted invasion of Mecca by the Ethiopian king Abraha. His family belonged to a respected but not wealthy branch of the Quraysh, who controlled the Kaaba and Mecca's trade network. However, tragedy struck early in his life. His father Abdullah died before he was born. His mother Amina passed away when he was 6 years old. His grandfather Abdul Muttalib, who briefly cared for him, also died 2 years later. With both parents and his grandfather gone, Muhammad was raised by his uncle Abu Talib, a leader of the Hashemite clan. Growing up, Muhammad experienced the harsh realities of Meccan society. The once honorable Bedouin values of generosity and fairness were being replaced by greed and corruption among the wealthy merchant class. Despite these challenges, Muhammad became known for his honesty and trustworthiness. He earned the title Al-Amin, the trustworthy, a quality that would later aid his prophetic mission. As a young man, he worked as a caravan trader, traveling across Arabia and interacting with Jewish, Christian, and Zoroastrian community. These encounters introduced him to monotheistic traditions and shaped his spiritual outlook. At the age of 25, Muhammad was hired by Khadijah, a wealthy merchant widow, to manage her trade caravans. Impressed by his integrity, she proposed marriage. Their union was both a partnership in business and faith. Khadijah would become Muhammad's first and most loyal supporter, standing by him through the most difficult years of his mission. The first revelation. By his late 30s, Muhammad became increasingly disillusioned with Meccan society. He witnessed corruption, inequality, and exploitation among the city's elites. The tribal rivalries and idol worship at the Kaaba felt empty and misguided. He sought spiritual solitude, spending time meditating in the cave of Hira, on the outskirts of Mecca. It was during one of these retreats that his life changed forever. According to Islamic tradition, the angel Gabriel appeared to him and commanded, "Read." Muhammad, who was illiterate, responded, "I cannot read." Gabriel repeated the command, pressing Muhammad until he finally recited, "Read in the name of your Lord, who created man from a clot of blood. Read, and your Lord is most generous, who taught by the pen taught man that which he knew not." Quran 96:1-5. Shaken and terrified, Muhammad rushed home to Khadijah, who comforted and reassured him. She sought advice from her cousin Waraka ibn Nawfal, a Christian scholar, who confirmed, "This is the same revelation given to Moses. You are a prophet." This marked the beginning of Islam. The early years of Islam. For the next 3 years, Muhammad preached in secret, sharing his revelations with close family and friends. His first followers included Khadijah, his wife and unwavering supporter; Abu Bakr, his closest friend and future caliph; Ali ibn Abi Talib, his young cousin; Zayd ibn Haritha, his adopted son. As his message spread, he openly declared his prophethood around 613 CE, calling for monotheism, Tawhid, worship of the one true God, Allah, social justice, helping the poor, orphans, and the oppressed, moral integrity, abandoning greed, dishonesty and idolatry. However, his teachings threatened the Quraysh elites, who controlled Mecca's economy and the Kaaba's idol worship. To them, Islam was not just a religious movement, it was a direct challenge to their power. Persecution and resistance. As Muhammad's followers grew, so did the opposition. The Quraysh leaders responded with public ridicule. They mocked Muhammad, calling him a madman and a liar. Social boycotts. They banned trade and marriages with Muslims. Torture and persecution. Many early converts faced severe punishments. Among the worst victims was Bilal ibn Rabah, an Ethiopian slave. His master tortured him in the desert heat, placing a heavy rock on his chest, demanding he renounce Islam. Instead, Bilal repeatedly declared, God is one. He was later freed by Abu Bakr, becoming Islam's first Mu'azzin caller to prayer. As the situation worsened, Muhammad advised some followers to flee to Abyssinia, Ethiopia, where they were granted protection by the Christian king, Negus Ashama ibn Abjar. The Hijra, migration to Medina. By 619 CE, Muhammad faced his most difficult year, known as the Year of Sorrow. His wife, Khadijah, passed away. His uncle Abu Talib, who protected him from the Quraysh, also died. With no protection, his enemies plotted to assassinate him. It was at this time that the people of Yathrib, later called Medina, invited Muhammad to lead their city and resolve their conflicts. In 622 CE, Muhammad and his followers secretly migrated to Medina, a moment known as the Hajj. This event marked the official start of the Islamic calendar, year 1 AH. The transformation of Islam from a persecuted faith into a growing political force. The formation of the first Muslim community, Ummah. In Medina, Muhammad established Islam as a social, political and religious system. He created the Constitution of Medina, ensuring harmony between Muslims, Jews and local tribes. He formed alliances and military strategies to defend against Meccan aggression. Islam was no longer just a spiritual message, it had become a movement that would reshape Arabia. Islam's rise to power. He and his followers had migrated to Medina, escaping persecution and forming the first Islamic state. But the Quraysh had no intention of letting him establish a new power center. Over the next 10 years, a series of battles, political alliances, and strategic decisions would transform Islam from a persecuted movement into a dominant force in Arabia. The Constitution of Medina. Upon arriving in Medina, Muhammad found a divided society. The city was home to Arab tribes, Muslims and pagans, Jewish tribes, Banu Qanuqa, Banu Nadir, Banu Qurayza, Christian and polytheistic groups. To unite them, Muhammad established the Constitution of Medina, an agreement that recognized Muslims and Jews as equal citizens, established mutual defense agreements, allowed religious freedom, as long as loyalty was maintained. This was a groundbreaking political move, making Islam more than just a religion. It was now a governing system. However, the Quraysh in Mecca saw Medina as a growing threat. They prepared for war. The Battle of Badr. 2 years after the migration, war became inevitable. The Quraysh sent a large trade caravan from Syria, led by Abu Sufyan. Muhammad saw this as an opportunity. By intercepting it, he could weaken the Meccan economy. The Quraysh, upon hearing of Muhammad's plan, gathered an army of 1,000 soldiers and marched to Badr. Muhammad had only 313 men, poorly armed and mostly farmers. The odds were impossible, but the Muslims believed God was with them. As the battle began, the Quraysh cavalry charged, confident of an easy victory. The Muslims held their ground, fighting strategically. Then, according to Islamic tradition, a divine wind confused the Meccan forces. By midday, the Quraysh were in full retreat. 70 Meccans were killed and many leaders were captured. Badr was a massive victory. Muhammad's followers saw it as proof of divine favor. Islam was no longer seen as weak. However, the Quraysh were humiliated. They vowed the Battle of Uhud. A year later, in 625 CE, the Quraysh, led by Abu Sufyan, assembled a force of 3,000 soldiers, triple the size of the Muslim army. Muhammad positioned his 700 men strategically on Mount Uhud, placing archers on a hill to prevent a cavalry attack. At first, the Muslims gained the upper hand, pushing the Quraysh back. But the archers, eager for loot, abandoned their positions. This was a fatal mistake. The Quraysh cavalry, led by Khalid ibn al-Walid, flanked the Muslims. Chaos broke out, Muhammad was injured, and many thought he had died. The Muslim forces retreated to the mountain, barely surviving. Uhud was a devastating loss, but Abu Sufyan did not press his advantage. The Quraysh believed Islam was finished and returned to Mecca, unaware that Muhammad's movement was far from over. The Battle of the Trench, 2 years later, in 621 CE, the Quraysh and their allies launched a final attack, this time with 10,000 soldiers, the largest army Arabia had seen. Muhammad, outnumbered, took inspiration from Persian military tactics. He ordered his men to dig a massive trench around Medina, something never seen before in Arabian warfare. When the Quraysh arrived, they were shocked. Their cavalry was useless. They could not cross the trench. They laid siege to Medina for 2 weeks, but food and supplies ran out. Finally, a massive storm struck, scattering their forces. With no hope of victory, the Quraysh retreated. The Muslims had survived. This was the turning point. Islam was now too powerful to be destroyed. Muhammad had secured Medina, but the Quraysh were still a threat. It was time to negotiate. The Treaty of Hudaybiyah, 628 CE. In 628 CE, Muhammad and 1,400 followers set out for Mecca, not for war but for pilgrimage to the Kaaba. The Quraysh, still wary, blocked their path at Hudaybiyah, refusing them entry. Rather than fight, Muhammad proposed a peace treaty. Muslims would not perform pilgrimage that year but could return next year. A 10-year truce was declared. Any Meccan who converted to Islam had to be returned, but any Muslim who left Islam could stay in Mecca. At first, many Muslims were outraged, feeling humiliated, but Muhammad saw the bigger picture. This treaty gave Islam time to grow. Over the next 2 years, Islam spread rapidly. Many Arab tribes joined Muhammad, seeing him as a leader of peace and strength. In just 2 years, the Muslim population doubled. The Quraysh realized they had made a mistake. They broke the treaty in 630 CE, giving Muhammad the justification to march on Mecca. The conquest of Mecca, 630 CE. By now, Muhammad had 10,000 soldiers, the largest force in Arabia. He marched toward Mecca, but unlike previous battles, there was no bloodshed. The Quraysh, knowing they could not win, surrendered without resistance. Muhammad entered Mecca and headed straight for the Kaaba. There he destroyed the idols, proclaiming, "Truth has come, and falsehood has perished." Quran 1781. He forgave his former enemies, including Abu Sufyan and Khalid ibn al-Walid, who later converted to Islam. Islam had now triumphed in its birthplace. Muhammad's final years, 630–632 CE. After securing Mecca, Muhammad united the rest of Arabia. In 632 CE, he performed his farewell pilgrimage, delivering his final sermon at Mount Arafat, where he emphasized the equality of all Muslims. No Arab is superior to a non-Arab. The rights of women: treat women with kindness and respect. The finality of Islam: I leave you with the Quran and my teachings. Shortly after Muhammad fell ill, on June 8, 632 CE, at the age of 630 he passed away in Medina. His death shook the Muslim world, but his mission was complete. Islam was now the dominant force in Arabia. The birth of the Caliphate, 632. For the first time since the beginning of Islam, the followers of the Prophet were without a leader. Who would take his place? How would this new faith survive without its founder? What followed was a period of rapid expansion, political struggles, and the first civil war in Islamic history. The selection of Abu Bakr, 632 CE. After Muhammad's death, his followers gathered in Medina to decide who would lead the Muslim community. There was no clear successor. Some believed leadership should pass to Ali ibn Abi Talib, Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law. Others supported Abu Bakr, Muhammad's closest companion and father-in-law. After a heated discussion, the elders of Medina chose Abu Bakr as the first caliph, Khalifa, meaning successor to the Messenger of God. Ali and his supporters were unhappy, but they accepted the decision for now. The Ridda Wars, 632–633 CE. Not all of Arabia accepted Abu Bakr's rule. Several tribes who had converted to Islam during Muhammad's lifetime now refused to recognize Abu Bakr. Some even followed false prophets, such as Musaylima the liar. Abu Bakr responded with the Ridda Wars of apostasy. Over the course of a year, his forces crushed the rebellious tribes and united Arabia once again under Islam. But the Arab armies were not finished. With the Arabian Peninsula secure, Abu Bakr turned his attention beyond Arabia.
The conquest of Persia and the Byzantine lands, 634–6051 c. Two great empires lay on the borders of Arabia, the Byzantine Empire, Eastern Roman Empire in the west, the Sassanid Persian Empire in the east. Both had been weakened by decades of war and internal struggles. The Arab armies were small but highly mobile. They fought with speed and discipline, using tactics that allowed them to outmaneuver their heavily armored enemies. In 636 CE, at the Battle of Yarmouk, the Muslims crushed the Byzantine forces, taking Syria and Palestine. In 637 CE, at the Battle of Qadisiyah, the Arabs defeated the Persians, capturing Iraq. By 6051 CE, the entire Sassanid Empire had collapsed, and Persia was under Muslim control. The speed and scale of the conquests shocked the world. In just 2 decades, the Muslim Caliphate had expanded from the deserts of Arabia to North Africa, Persia and Central Asia. But victory came at a cost: the assassination of Umar and Uthman, 6044–6056 CE. After Abu Bakr died in 634 CE, he was succeeded by Umar ibn al-Khattab, one of Muhammad's most trusted companions. Umar was a brilliant strategist, and oversaw the greatest expansion of the Caliphate. However, in 6044 CE, Umar was assassinated by a Persian slave. The Muslim world was once again without a leader. The elders selected Uthman ibn Affan, from the powerful Umayyad clan, as the third caliph. But Uthman's rule was controversial. He favored his own family, giving key positions to Umayyad relatives. Many Muslims accused him of corruption. Revolts began to spread across the empire. In 6056 CE, a group of rebels stormed his house in Medina and killed him. For the first time, the Muslim world was divided. The rise of Ali and the First Fitna, 6056–61 CE. After Uthman's death, the community finally turned to Ali ibn Abi Talib, Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law. Ali became the fourth caliph, but he inherited a fractured empire. The Umayyads, led by Muawiyah, the governor of Syria, refused to accept Ali's leadership. Muawiyah, a relative of Uthman, demanded revenge for Uthman's murder. The empire descended into civil war. This conflict became known as the First Fitna, First Islamic Civil War. In 6057 CE, at the Battle of Siffin, the two sides met in battle. After weeks of fighting, they agreed to arbitration, a decision that many of Ali's supporters resented. This led to the rise of the Khawarij, an extremist group that believed Ali had betrayed Islam. In 6061 CE, one of these extremists assassinated Ali. With his death, the Rashidun Caliphate ended, and a new dynasty took power. In its place, a new dynasty rose to power, the Umayyads. This was a pivotal moment in Islamic history. The Umayyads transformed Islam from a religious movement into a powerful empire stretching from Spain in the west to India in the east. But their rule was also marked by controversy, rebellion and division. Explores the rise of the Umayyad dynasty, its vast expansion, and the foundations of Islamic civilization. The rise of Muawiyah and the founding of the Umayyad Caliphate, 6061 CE. After Ali's death, the leadership of the Muslim world fell to Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, the governor of Syria. Muawiyah was from the powerful Umayyad family, an aristocratic clan from Mecca. Unlike the previous caliphs, who were chosen by the Muslim community, Muawiyah declared himself caliph, by force. To consolidate his rule, he moved the capital from Medina to Damascus, closer to Byzantine influence. He centralized power, creating a hereditary monarchy, a major shift from the previous system of elected caliphs. He expanded the Islamic military, recruiting non-Arabs into the ranks. But his seizure of power angered many Muslims, especially Ali's supporters, who believed leadership should remain within Muhammad's family. Thus the Sunni-Shia divide deepened. For the next century, the Umayyads ruled with iron discipline, expanding the empire further than ever before. The expansion of the Umayyad Empire 6061–750 CE. Under the Umayyads, the Islamic Empire became the largest in the world. In North Africa, the Arabs conquered the Berbers, absorbing them into the empire. In 711 CE, the Muslim general Tariq ibn Ziyad led an army into Spain, defeating the Visigoths at the Battle of Guadalete. By 7032 CE, the Arabs reached France, but were defeated by Charles Martel at the Battle of Tours. Despite this setback, the Muslim presence in Spain remained for nearly 800 years. Meanwhile, in the east, Arab forces pushed into Central Asia and India, clashing with local kingdom. By the early 700s, the Islamic world stretched from the Atlantic Ocean to the borders of China, a territory larger than Rome at its peak. But while expansion brought wealth and power, it also created deep internal problems. The problems of Umayyad rule. The Umayyads ruled as kings, adopting Persian and Byzantine court traditions. They lived in luxury, wore silk robes, and built magnificent palaces. But many Muslims resented their rule. Discrimination against non-Arabs. Despite converting to Islam, Persians, Berbers and others were treated as second-class citizens. They had to pay a special tax, jizya, and were excluded from government positions. Heavy taxation. The Umayyads taxed both Muslims and non-Muslims, angering merchants and farmers. Shia resistance. Shia Muslims, still loyal to Ali's descendants, refused to recognize the Umayyad rulers. Rebellions erupted across Iraq, Persia and Arabia. These tensions weakened Umayyad rule, and by the mid-700s, a new movement was rising in the east. The Abbasid Revolution, 750 CE. By the mid-8th century, the Umayyad Caliphate was deeply unpopular. A rival family, the Abbasids, claimed to be descendants of Muhammad's uncle. They gathered support from non-Arabs, Shia Muslims, and discontented merchants. A Persian general named Abu Muslim led an armed uprising against the Umayyads. The Abbasid forces defeated the Umayyads at the Battle of the Zub in the Umayyad Caliph Marwan II was killed, marking the end of the dynasty. The new Abbasid rulers massacred the remaining Umayyads, wiping out nearly the entire family. Only one Umayyad prince, Abd al-Rahman, escaped and fled to Spain, where he founded the Umayyad Emirate of Cordoba. With the Abbasids now in power, the Islamic world entered a new era, one of cultural and scientific flourish.
The Abbasid Caliphate and the rise of rival dynasties. The Umayyads had fallen. In 750 CE, the Abbasids seized power, establishing a new Islamic order. This was a transformational period in Islamic history. The Abbasids ushered in a golden age, making Baghdad the center of the world. But over time, the empire fragmented, new rival dynasties emerged, the Crusades began, and the Islamic world faced new threats from the east. The Abbasid Revolution and the founding of Baghdad 750–800 CE. With the defeat of the Umayyads, the Abbasid dynasty took control of the Islamic world. Unlike their predecessors, the Abbasids shifted power away from Arab elites, integrating Persians, Turks and other ethnic groups. Established Baghdad as the new capital in 762 CE, a city strategically placed near Persian and Mesopotamian trade routes. Focused on culture, science and trade, rather than just military expansion. Under Caliph Harun al-Rashid, the Abbasid Caliphate reached its peak. Baghdad became the wealthiest and most advanced city in the world. This was the beginning of the Islamic Golden Age. The Islamic Golden Age, 800–1000 CE. The Abbasids invested in knowledge and scholarship, leading to major advancements. The House of Wisdom, a vast library and research center where scholars translated works from Greek, Persian, Indian and Chinese sources. Preserved and expanded upon the philosophy of Aristotle, the medicine of Hippocrates, and the mathematics of the Indians. Scientific and medical advances. Al-Khwarizmi developed algebra, a term derived from his book Al-Jabr. Ibn Sina Avicenna wrote the Canon of Medicine, a standard medical textbook in Europe for centuries. Al-Hazan ibn al-Haytham made major discoveries in optics and physics, influencing later scientists like Galileo. Trade and wealth. The Abbasid Empire connected Europe, Africa, and Asia, creating a vast trade network. Baghdad's markets were filled with silks from China, spices from India, and gold from Africa. But while the cultural and economic influence of the Abbasids grew, their political control began to weaken. The fragmentation of the Abbasid Caliphate. By the 9th century, the Abbasid Caliphate struggled to control its vast empire. Three major factors led to its decline. Internal power struggles. After Harun al-Rashid's death in 809 CE, a civil war erupted between his sons. The empire split into rival factions, leading to instability. The rise of regional dynasties. The Fatimids established their own caliphate in Egypt, 99 CE. The Umayyads in Spain refused to acknowledge Abbasid rule, forming Al-Andalus. The Bumayyads, a Persian dynasty, seized control of Baghdad itself in 9045 CE, reducing the Abbasids to Turkish influence and the rise of the Seljuks. In the 11th century, Turkic warriors called the Seljuks migrated from Central Asia. They overpowered the weak Abbasid military and seized Persia, Mesopotamia, and Anatolia. The Seljuks entered Baghdad and forced the Abbasid Caliph to recognize their leader as Sultan. Though the Abbasid Caliph remained the symbolic head of Islam, real power now lay with the Turkic sultans. The Islamic world was now deeply divided, but a new challenge was about to emerge from the Christian world: the Crusades and the Islamic response. By the late 11th century, the Islamic world was politically fractured. The Fatimids in Egypt, the Seljuks in Anatolia, and the Abbasids in Baghdad all competed for power. Sensing this weakness, Christian Europe launched a holy war, the Crusades. European knights invaded the Middle East, capturing Jerusalem in The First Crusade established Christian kingdoms in the Levant, threatening Muslim lands. The Muslim response was slow and disorganized at first, but by the mid-12th century, a new leader emerged: Salah ad-Din, the founder of the Ayyubid dynasty, united Egypt and Syria. In 1187 CE, his army recaptured Jerusalem, dealing the Crusaders a massive defeat. Saladin's victory restored Muslim control over the Holy Land. However, the Crusades were not the greatest threat the Islamic world would face. A far more destructive force was coming from the east: the Mongol invasion and the fall of Baghdad, 1258 CE. In the early 13th century, a storm was brewing on the Central Asian steppes. A group of nomadic horsemen, led by Genghis Khan, began a campaign of conquest unlike anything the world had seen before. By 1220 CE, the Mongols had destroyed the Khwarezmian Empire in Persia, laid waste to Samarkand and Bukhara, pushed into Afghanistan and the Middle East. But the worst was yet to come. In 1258 CE, Genghis Khan's grandson, Hulagu Khan, marched on Baghdad with an army of 100. The Abbasids were unprepared. The city, once the jewel of Islamic civilization, was sacked and burned. The Caliph al-Mustasim was captured and executed. The House of Wisdom was destroyed, along with centuries of knowledge. 800,000 people were slaughtered, and Baghdad was left in ruins. This marked the end of the Abbasid Caliphate as a political power. The Islamic world would never fully recover from this devastation. However, even as the Mongols destroyed the empire, Islamic culture survived and even spread among the Mongols themselves. By the 1300s, the Mongols converted to Islam, forming the Ilkhanate in Persia. The Abbasid caliphs continued as spiritual leaders in Cairo, but real power would soon shift to a new empire, the Ottoman. The Abbasid Caliphate had risen to greatness, only to fall to internal strife, Crusaders and Mongol invasion. But Islam was far from finished. A new age was beginning, one dominated by Turks.